Okay.
Yay.
So please make sure that your microphone is muted. Join the chat by clicking chat, and you may have to choose host and panelists, or otherwise what you put in chat may not be going out to everyone, but will only be going out to maybe a single individual. So it says host and panelists is what you're looking for.
And actually, Greg, if I may interject, this is Kim. I think if they want everyone to see it, then they would actually click everyone. But if they only want the host and panelists to see it, then indeed clicking host and panelists.
Oh, I see.
There's an everyone option.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, even better. So use the everyone option. Thank you, Kim. And be kind in your comments and be open to new ideas. And again, our session tonight is, why do I need STEM if I'm not going to be an engineer? And Kim Yoke will be our moderator, and she's going to introduce our special guests.
All right, thank you so much, Greg. And thanks to everyone who has been part of planning and organizing this webinar. Thanks also to all of you who are here. And I see that we've started to introduce ourselves in the chat, and please continue to do that. We'd love to know who is here and maybe why you chose to participate tonight, or maybe something about what you do or who you are. I see that there is a question. We can see you. We will not be able to hear you, or I'm sorry. Yeah, we can see you in the chat, I should say. There is no video for the participants. There, I believe, could be an option for us to invite you to unmute, and we may or may not sort of do that throughout the course of the hour. But yes, other than that, we really do want you to participate in the chat for sure. And we have folks that are watching the chat, and there'll be some time for question and answer toward the end of the hour. So yes, please introduce yourselves in the chat. And at this point, I will introduce the panelists. And oh, Greg, actually, if you wouldn't mind resharing that last slide, just so we have their information up while we're doing that. All right, thank you. All right, so our two panelists this evening, I have really had just the distinct pleasure of getting to know these two colleagues throughout the course of the last few weeks. So I am really pleased to introduce them to you now. Aurea Rivera is a native of Puerto Rico. She graduated with honors in electrical engineering from the University of Puerto Rico. She is now retired, but she is very, very busy in retirement and still very involved in various learning experiences and work experiences. And you are going to hear more about those as she shares with you this evening. And then we also have Gina Trueheart, who is an assistant professor at the Cincinnati College of Music at the University of Cincinnati. And she is an associate professor of costume design. And she has worked, as you can see in the bio, at a number of places, or her credits, I should say, are vast in terms of where her designs have been used. And again, you're going to see more about her work and how both of these colleagues' work applies in STEM in a variety of ways. And then we will have a special guest a little bit later on, whom we will introduce when we come to that segment. All right, so thank you, Greg, for sharing your slides. And at this point, I will go ahead and share my slides, and we'll continue on. Let's see, so I share first. It's always funny how we have to narrate these things. All right, can you see my slides? Okay, I see thumbs up and nods. All right, excellent. So as Aurea and Gina and I were preparing for this evening, we just had a lot of conversation really about STEM and about STEM in many, many disciplines, really every discipline, and some of the questions that surround STEM in the broader community and in the world. And so these themes came out in our conversation, and you're going to hear these themes come out in their conversations tonight. But we wanted to share these up front because these were things that that they felt are very important that we all want to make sure we communicate throughout the hour. And I'll just read them very briefly. But all people need STEM. So that sounds simple, but but it's really important. STEM appears in our lives in ways of which we are often unaware. Young people, and actually all learners, need to feel engaged and supported in their learning. That's STEM or any other area. And we need to build each person's confidence for engaging in STEM, especially when stereotypes may diminish this confidence. And you're going to be hearing more about, again, all of these ideas throughout the webinar this evening. All right, so we did want to share a few references for the conversation. We may or may not specifically refer to these as we are talking. We may, but we wanted to share these up front because we believe that these sets of practices in science, mathematics, and technology and engineering are really critical to thinking about how STEM really does apply in essentially everything we do in our world in just many, many ways. So Jan Harelko, who's one of our hosts tonight, will be sharing the links that you see in this slideshow in the chat. And you feel free to explore those links at any time during the conversations tonight. But we also want you to know that the slideshow will be shared, and so you'll have these links at that point as well. And just to say a little bit about these practices, you can see that the science and engineering practices come from the National Science Teaching Association, which is a national organization of science educators. The Standards for Mathematical Practice, the link that you have there is to the resources for the Standards for Mathematical Practice provided by the Ohio Department of Education, as well as a link to, I always share freely what I call a friendly version of the Standards for Mathematical Practice. So you're welcome to take a look at that as well. And then practices in technological and engineering literacy from the International Technology and Engineering Educators Association. So we wanted to share these because these all represent relatively broad habits of mind, habits of learning that again apply in so many different ways. And I think you're going to see again examples of this throughout the evening.
Can I ask one question?
Absolutely. Whoops, I didn't mean to click on that.
I put my message in the chat, but I can't get it to show to everybody else. What have I not hit?
I'm thinking you
Choose
didn't
to
hit
everyone.
everyone.
I didn't do what?
Yeah, I think you didn't hit everyone. Can you click everyone as one of the
hit
options?
everyone.
How about enter or return? Did you?
Nope.
Well,
I'll keep working on it so you can go ahead.
Okay.
Eventually, we will have all those websites that
have them
Kim
here.
just mentioned.
I have them as well, so I'll drop them in.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. All right, so we are going to, at this point, start hearing from our panelists. So at first, I'm going to invite Aurea to share some thoughts about this bigger question: what has brought you here? And that doesn't necessarily mean here tonight, although it in a way it could, but I'm going to ask each panelist to talk about these questions. What do you do in your work life? So you're going to hear a little more about that. What significant events or opportunities brought you to this point in your career? And why is it important to you to open doors to STEM in all disciplines for those who have not been fully included in the past? And again, participants, please, as our panelists are sharing, please share your own experiences, and we'll be trying to kind of watch for those as well. So Aurea, I'm going to invite you to share first.
Thank you. I had to be sensitive about time because God knows I can speak forever. So it is interesting that the title of our conference is, why do we need STEM if you're not going to be an engineer? Because I'm one. So that's interesting. Thank you again for the opportunity to share my experiences with you. There were one key event that really made me aware that the opportunities that I have taken for granted are not basically available to everyone. I became aware in 1998 that there was a National Science Foundation study that basically described why there's this disparity in young women and STEM. And it came about And the conclusion was social norms. And social norms very quickly is that whatever is decided that is proper for a particular age group. So the foundation, National Foundation study basically stated that the bifurcation, okay, the separation between boys and girls happened in middle school. And the reason is that it is by cultural norms, there are things that are emphasizing that are good and appropriate for young girls and young boys, and STEM is not happen to be one of those things. And that preoccupied me a lot because as a woman in STEM, in technology and science, I could see the effects of that because there were not that many women that were part of the engineering cadre for, in my case, was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So that realization transformed me and made me an advocate for opportunities for young women, starting as young as 2 years old, second graders, as part of the Imagine Engineering program that the Engineers Foundation of Ohio sponsors, and math counts, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So I have engaged that as part of my giving back to the community, because I believe it's important for us to let everybody know that STEM is an equal opportunity for everybody, not just for traditional boys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aurea. All right, and Gina, would you share?
Hello, everybody. I'm kind of the complete opposite. I feel like I accidentally didn't know I was doing anything in math and sciences. I was that typical kid that didn't exactly believe I could do algebra and high school math and things like that. And so I was mixed up in all the theater. I did everything theater you could possibly do. And eventually my story brought me to becoming a professor of costume technology. I'm costume design, but my true passion is pattern making and making the costumes and dyeing fabrics and those kinds of things. I'm the maker of the group. And it wasn't until just a few years ago here at University of Cincinnati, a nice little professor, Shelley Harkness, I saw you're here, education mathematician that came across the way over to CCM and said, hey, what's going on over there? Can I come visit your patterning class? And so we got together, kind of a kismet situation, and she came over and visited my students, literally pattern drafting. And she kind of quietly asked one of my students, do you feel like you're good at math? And the student said, no, but they were literally doing geometry right there in front of her. And that's when, a little more conversation. And we started to realize there truly is a thing that we need to help, that the sort of stigma that theater kids end up going down this other path because they don't believe they're doing anything STEM. But then when you stop and you look around my building, I'm in the basement of the theater, there's sound design, doing all kinds of technology and computer programming and physics with the sound waves and understanding how the sound is bouncing off the walls and manipulating all of that. You've got the technical directors literally doing physics and building bridges and keeping actors safe on stage and flying people. You've got the lighting guys, and as technology gets even more, you've got all this programming and programmable, 20 years ago, there wasn't programmable lighting effects that you could do. So as technology in theater became more and more, it's kind of fabulous to see how students are just sort of taking to it accidentally sometimes, because they didn't start out to say, I'm going to be a physics major. I'm going to go into lighting, right? So my path took me with more fun with, as Shelley and I started talking more about, well, how can we help? How can we help create lessons that might, things that we can do? So we put together a how to make a baseball hat project for elementary school, like junior high 6th graders. to see if it would be a lesson that would help reach out in a new way in how to teach. So that's kind of been, and ever since then, I've been paying so much more attention to chemistry. Dyeing fabric is, there's at least 10 different types of chemical properties in fabrics and reactive dyes and fiber reactive dyes that you have, that we're working with. So we're doing it. We don't even know it over here in the theater department. So that's kind of where, how I got to where I am now, and would like to keep helping teach young people.
Thank you so much, Gina. And it's interesting. I mean, I think one of the things that I hear you saying, and that I'm in conversations where this idea comes up so often, is that what people think of as science or technology, or well, particularly science and mathematics, but in some ways technology and engineering too, that those words have maybe very particular meanings to any one of us. And for many of us, the meanings are so much more constrained and limited than they might be if we were able to have the kinds of experiences that Aurea and Gina both have already been describing. So we're going to be hearing more about that, but I'd also invite, again, our participants to share your own reflections or thoughts about just these ideas in the chat. What significant events or opportunities brought you to where you are right now in terms of the way that you think about STEM, and why do you think it's important to open doors to STEM in all disciplines, particularly for those who haven't been included in the past. So we'll give just a moment for folks to share some ideas in the chat. And in the meantime, I'm going to get ready to share our next slide. And we've got a lot of interesting visuals that our panelists will be sharing momentarily here. So let's see. All right. Well, we will continue to watch the chat, and I think we'll go ahead and continue with the next piece here. Oh, and I always do this in the wrong order, no matter how many times. So I'm going to share, and then I'm going to present. Okay. Okay. All right. So now we have this question: where do you see STEM in your work? And again, you've already heard some previews about this, but we are going to start with some slides. Actually, I realized that I put these in a different order than I meant to. So I'll ask Aurea to go first again, and then Gina also will share. We've got slides from both of the panelists. So Aurea, do you want to talk about, and you can sort of tell me when you're ready to flip slides.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
I believe that the best way to engage in STEM is by showing the example first, and then go back and talk about the fundamentals that build the capability. I have a passion for history. So you're going to see here's Enigma. When we're talking about encryption, that was the first really encrypting machine, although if you don't consider like most signals to be encryption too, which they are, but oh, by the way. So this is the Enigma machine. And if you remember, there was a movie not long time ago that basically stated that Alan Turing and Bletchley Park basically broke the encryption on Enigma. But later it is known that the actual breaking of that code happened at NCR in Dayton, Ohio. And it's fascinating that the Navy sponsored the work that happened at NCR. So the United States actually broke the Enigma code prior to Bletchley Park. But we're gonna leave Alan Turing with the Call of Fame for that one. So, and again, on the right-hand side, you see that we take cyber for granted today, but encryption, it is critical if we were to have secure communication. For example, when you go and you put your credit card in the ATM machine, there's an encryption mechanism that happens so you don't get your information taken. And there's a lot of conversation about how effective those mechanisms are. If you go to the next slide, please.
Yes. There we go. Okay.
And one of the encryption and hashing is a term that is used, basically uses elliptical equations. And nobody would have imagined for one moment that if you draw an elliptical equation and you take particular points, that you can basically get the initial seed for that hash. But anyway, so I'm pretty sure that the students will find fascinating that there is this branch of mathematics that basically serves as a foundation for keeping our information secure. Next slide, please. And then talking about steganography, say like 10 times, Aurea. Okay, so steganography is hiding information in plain sight. And what happens is that you can use, look at an image, and an image consists of what? Of pixels. And pixels basically have a bandwidth to them, okay, how much information you can put in. So you can basically manipulate some of those pixels so you can hide messages on it. And there is some speculation that the September 11th, 20th terrorists communicated through steganography their messages prior to the September 11th attack. So again, meshing history with technology, I imagine that Da Vinci never thought that they were going to use the Mona Lisa to hide information, but indeed, pixels can be manipulated and you can hide information. So there is another way that communication can be affected. And again, when we're talking about bits of information, again, this is another branch of mathematics that enables that to happen. Next slide, please. And then, of course, there is the global positioning system. And I remember when this capability was initially envisioned to help in missile defense, which is interesting that Mrs. Herelko is here, because we're talking about technology. So GPS initially was viewed as a way to minimize collateral damage in war. But there was these applications that basically can help you go from point A to point B. And you ask anybody today with a telephone and a Garmin and say, where do you want to go? And they will tell you, and they input information, but sometimes they don't have an appreciation that there's this constellation of satellites that permits all of that, what is called positioning, navigation, and timing to take place. And why timing is important, you may ask. Without a timing stamp, we're going to have proper banking around the world, because every single transaction has to be basically authenticated, not only by who you are, but by a timestamp. So you can get I want to say, especially when you're traveling overseas, that you get the proper currency exchanges. It is fascinating, all the applications that we have today as a result of the GPS system that was never intended to be used as part of the economy. So again, talking about signals that are basically manipulated, but generated from a constellation of satellites that help basically our day-to-day operations today. Next slide.
All right, and Aurea, maybe if you'd like to talk about this slide, and then I think we'll move on to Gina's. Just
perfect.
Oh, it's so hard to, with this hour, the hour will go so quickly.
And on this one, lastly, is think about DNA and the ability now to tailor the prescriptions and the medications that you're gonna get very quickly. Hope I don't scare anybody. I had gone to multiple breast biopsies, and the latest one, I didn't have to go to a biopsy because now there's an artificial intelligence model that use all my x-rays, and now they're able basically to predict that what they see is completely benign. So for anyone who had gone through that surgery knows exactly what I'm talking about. And 23andMe and other entities have permitted advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And anyone who's interested, I have tons of stories on that one. Over.
Thank you so much, Aurea. All right. And Gina, again, some really fascinating applications of STEM that I know you're excited to share next.
Well, we kind of got on a theme as we were chatting this last couple of weeks. What's old is new, and what is new is old. And as a pattern maker all of these years, I've been studying all kinds of contemporary drafting systems, historical drafting systems, and I've been introducing different types to my students over the years. And overall, I find it very fascinating that going back to Da Vinci and the perfect proportions of the human body and that ongoing artistic study of the human form, translating into the 19th century, if you fast forward, all of these tailors that were suddenly paying money to put their drafting systems, the supreme drafting systems, of course, they would put them out there into ladies' magazines and things like that. But the thing that's really fabulous is that everything is based on sort of ethnomathematics, proportions of the body. It's geometry sort of mashed up with the proportions of the human form and how much they pay attention to. For example, an armhole for your sleeve is 1/2 your chest measurement, and that always works, no matter, so really paying attention to proportions. And so those are kind of, what is new and what is old, and how we go about dealing with man, always trying to find how to take something in 3D, put it flat, and then put it back into 3D again. So these are a couple of slides I thought you would find interesting, just to sort of imagine the kinds of math that we're doing in theater to create historical clothing. And this is an actual diagram of the Taylor square. And if you've noticed, you can still buy this square. It was developed in 1909 with proportions of seconds and thirds on it, that basically sort of a glorified slide rule type of a thing, that actually the system really works. And to this day, I can use this drafting system, and based on a chest measurement and the height of the performer, and create a frock coat that will fit them, that they were figuring out these types of proportionate systems. And then let's see, what else did I have in here? And then this is a little taste of some of the fun that Shelley and I had developed with our hat math. We came up with some great ideas and experience. We had it in her math class for her students to teachers of math to test it out, and then we tested it out with my students in the costume department, and it was fabulously interesting to see how different groups of students approached it. So that was one of our trying to figure out a way to make something accessible to a student that might be afraid of doing math or not understanding how things relate to the real world. Let's see, what else did we first show? I think that might have been it.
Oh, yeah. But I did, Gina, I wanted to ask you two things. One, I remembered that when you shared this project with Aurea and I, as we were chatting earlier, one of the things you mentioned was how different students thought about what a pattern of a hat might actually look like.
Right. It was fascinating because the math students immediately thought that they should draw circles on paper. Like they immediately thought more geometry or, circles and triangles, and they started drawing. But the costuming students actually measured their heads and started thinking about their heads, because your head's actually an oval. It's not a circle. So that was interesting to see the different thought processes for the different groups of students.
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, the real life, again, being able to apply this so much to real life is so interesting to me. And then that I did want to ask you, I'm very curious, and I didn't have a chance to ask you this before. What is the difference? And I feel like I should know this, and I don't. What's the difference between a have and a second?
Oh,
Or
because
happen.
if you look back on, if you go back a slide to one of the, here, so look, the proportions of how you're going to do this drafting system, some things across the body, like going across the chest, those are all in thirds. The proportion of the man's chest is divided into thirds, like from the center front to your arm's eye would be 1/3, and then to your armhole would be 2/3, and then so around your chest. Other proportions lengthwise are in halves and fours. So arounds are in the thirds, and is the way that they develop these drafting systems. That kind of thing, relating to the proportions of the body. It's kind of the 19th century tailors and Da Vinci, you know, there's a connection there, right?
Indeed, indeed. Well, and I just, as we come back to this slide, and then we'll move on to our special guest. It is, again, as I was thinking about, you know, I have very, very little experience in costume design or clothing design, and I'm guessing that I, with my many years of academic mathematics, probably would not have thought to draw these particular shapes at first. I probably also would have started with a circle. And so again, this intersection of mathematics with really the world and ourselves as individual human beings, it's not something that we always explore or we have traditionally in the past in mathematics classes. And Gina, I'm going to let you introduce our special guest, since you kind of have a connection to her.
Oh, so I met this kid. So I would like to introduce my daughter, Elena, who is now a senior at University of Cincinnati. She's a double major in chemistry and physics, and has been studying in Dr. Strobia's optical sensors lab. And of course, proud shout out, she is currently going to be at Oak Ridge National Laboratories doing research. She'll have to explain it to you. I just say, oh, that's awesome. But the other part of the story about Gina Trueheart is that she went to down here in Cincinnati, we have a School of Creative and Performing Arts. So she was a dance major from 4th grade all the way through 12th. So she's lived the life of ballet and science, and you know, how did that happen? So we thought it would be great to hear a bit of Elena's story about how she ended up as a physics major. So Elena, would you like to tell us a little bit about how that happened and your experiences as a woman in STEM now?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I spent something like 15 years of my childhood doing ballet and theater, and excuse me, a lot of the things I would spend my time on after school and in the summers were a lot of like crafty projects and jewelry making and hat making and felting and those sorts of things, knowing who my mother is. And I always had this intense curiosity about the world, an eagerness to learn about what was going on around me. And I always had an interest in both the arts and the sciences. And then going into high school, I ended up having a chemistry teacher who really made me feel like I had a place in science and that I felt I had a purpose in continuing in science research. So that meant a lot to me. And that ended up kind of swinging the needle when I was trying to decide between pursuing ballet and pursuing science. I ended up majoring in physics when I came to UC. And that meant a lot to me. And in terms of helping others on their way up as well, it takes such a small amount to drive someone away from something they used to be passionate about, and it takes so much to rebuild someone's passion for something that it can get disheartening seeing. I think when I first started my like sophomore physics majors class, there was something like 20 people and like 8 or 9 women, and then I'm getting ready to present my capstone in physics and looking at the schedule, and there's only, out of the 11 people presenting, there's only 2 of us left who are women. And not everyone dropped out. Some graduated early or switched disciplines. But kind of losing track of these people I thought were always going to be around me has made me realize how much we lose out on talent, on new perspectives in exploring the world, and just sort of giving everyone a chance to fulfill that innate curiosity that they might have about the world and explore things beyond what they're told that they're allowed to.
And Elena, where do you see some of the intersections or parallels, or any word that you want to use, but between your creative performing background and your scientific background?
There are quite a few. In terms of just how I ended up realizing what it is I wanted to do with my career, I've realized I like working with experimental and like hands-on research a lot more. And I think like I can attribute like a spatial reasoning that I don't think I would have gotten from just science classes, or like a kind of a visual imagination when I'm thinking through physics problems, that I can think back to like, oh, well, what did this movement sort of feel like when I did dance, or how did I get this shape to exist when I was like working with clay as a kid, or things like that, has really helped me throughout my education. And in general, there's just so many. I think I had a professor tell me that my hair was the color of phosphate complexes. So there's a lot of like industry applications in terms of cosmetic science and dyeing and coloring and any sorts of geometry and pattern drafting and all of the things I was already familiar with that my mom teaches, is really cool to see.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I mean, and we want you to stay a part of the conversation here too as we continue. So it's so interesting to just hear again your background, and I mean, even just what you shared. I mean, I jotted down things like visual imagination in physics problems, and spatial reasoning and movement. And actually, when you talked about spatial reasoning and movement, it reminded me, Aurea, of something that you shared about your own experience with kind of developing your I don't know, ability isn't the right word, but your experience with spatial reasoning and movement and topology, and how that applies to solving problems. So, all right, would you mind just talking a little bit about that?
Oh, thank you. I have to say that, Elena, that I am trained to be like the traditional mathematician and engineer, that you go through the rigor of deriving everything. But I discovered that it becomes, I would not say easier, but it is, the concepts becomes more relevant the moment that you can visualize what you're trying to do first. So I know in mathematics, there's this phrase that is used all the time, that you need to know the form of the solution before you get started. So, and for many years, I had that wonder, okay, the form of the solution. But it is the concept that if you can see in nature examples of what you're trying to do, it is easier to translate that knowledge. In your case, you were blessed to have an artistic family helping you along. For some of us who doesn't have an inch of artistry in our bodies, we struggle through trying to figure out how to look at nature differently. But it comes to you, and once you have an appreciation, oh, science really works, then that basically makes the job of integrating technology so much easier. I hope I addressed the question. Over.
Oh, very much so. Yes, thank you. Yeah, and actually, Aurea, I'm going to ask you to sort of continue now with our next question, or questions, I suppose. And again, I will invite Aurea and Gina and Elena to all comment a bit on these, maybe just for a couple of minutes each. But and we'll, again, we could spend all evening talking about these things. So, but the questions of the hour, we felt as we were planning. So first of all, why or how does taking STEM classes benefit all learners? how do we support all learners in STEM, especially those who have been underrepresented in STEM? And I just realized I need to share fully here. And how do we support learners who are not confident or believe that they can't engage in STEM studies? And again, we invite participants to share your own thoughts in the chat. So, Aurea, would you like to start us off with your thoughts on one or more of these questions?
Thank you. I believe that language, the language that we use, it is critical, and especially for students that are non-traditional students. Myself, a Latina, a woman, it is critical that as teachers and as professionals that we start to think about the inclusiveness of what STEM is all about. And not that, I would say there is not really right or wrongs here. It's more like an appreciation that it really takes a village, especially in a high technological world like today, that by us, our culture not really embracing and bring everybody into the fold, that we as a nation may be falling behind. So the point that I'm trying to make is that language is important, and our ability to bring others that are non-traditionally engaged in math and science will be basically directly related to our ability to embrace all the collective. Over.
Thank you. That's well said in a lot of things that we're seeing today. Thank you. Gina.
Oh, I think the most important thing we need to do is find new ways of engaging the young students before their little hearts are hardened and they become afraid of any of the STEM. We were find ways to do something creative and connect the dots for them, that you're mixing Kool-Aid and you're doing a little fabric dyeing project, but what you're really doing is chemistry. So I think if we can get more creative to reach out both sides of the young students' brains, the creative side and the math side, and bring all of that together, all of those sciences together. I think we should not compartmentalize in those younger years of teaching. Blow some stuff up in the backyard, right? Or something,
Absolutely. All right, thank you. Elena.
I think everything that's been mentioned about why STEM is so important for everyone to have access to is wonderful. And then in terms of supporting those who aren't confident in themselves or haven't typically been included or like ushered towards STEM, one of the biggest things I've learned even just in college is how much a sense of belonging and a sense of community really matters.
Yeah.
There are programs at UC that are things like learning communities that aim to put like freshmen in the same majors together and things like that. But more specific concerns of like, oh, do I belong here? Do I feel supported? Do I feel like I can do this? It takes more than just having peers, but also having mentors who you feel are proud of you and believe in what you can do, and you feel like you can ask questions you might think are stupid, and you can work through tough problems when you're questioning your own understanding of the fundamentals of what you're doing. Having that support as you go through those things at any level is critical.
Absolutely. My goodness. I I'm always in awe of everything that I've heard I've met Elena for the first time tonight, but hearing from all three of our panelists and guests, there's just so much that is in my mind right now, and one of the things I think as I hear all three of you share is I often think about the phrase, we need to fling wide the doors of, in my case, I often say mathematics, but fling wide the doors of STEM to all. And I want to just kind of reiterate Elena's idea of belonging and community, that these are critical in STEM, really in all disciplines and in humanity in general, but particularly for being able to include people who have not felt included in the past and maybe have been excluded. Gina's ideas of integration and not compartmentalizing learning in the early grades, and I would argue all the way up through, truly the more relevance. I mean, we've just heard so many examples of how compartmentalization really, I mean, or I should say the examples that we've heard are absolutely the opposite of compartmentalization as we look at STEM in all of these different ways. And then Aurea talked about the language that we use and how language can either emphasize existing social norms or disrupt existing social norms and create new social norms. And as we put all of those together, I mean, these are the kinds of experiences that I would love for our students coming through and all learners to be able to experience. At this point, we'd like to allow or ask for some questions. And so Jan, I know you've been watching the chat, and Greg, I think you've been watching the chat also, and Kelly. So I'd love for any of you to share something that you've seen in the chat that might be a good question for our panelists to address.
Most people are sharing their content experience here. We've got Meg Drager from Chaminade Julienne High School, who has had some really great ideas and asked for where was the article about the hat, making the hat, excuse me. But what I would like to ask the three panelists is, we tend to teach content in an integrated way up until middle school. And then we segregate people out. You know, there's your English class, there's your science class, but we don't, we're starting to have books that are published about teaching. Was it Laura Bush put out a book about teaching STEM in middle school. I presented an article over in Ireland about trying to do it at the high school level, because I've seen it done. I've seen it done at Centerville High School. They did one project and had each teacher do their content area. That teacher was in charge of those standards, but the one project covered everything, like Elena was talking about, that involved all content. Where do you think that should start, or should we even do that? Should we keep the kids in their little silos of content? Anybody can answer.
Well, I think from what I see in higher education, anything that we're now dealing with students coming up through, that it's been so compartmentalized, so many, having to help them connect the dots more than we did 10 years ago, even just in the topics that we teach as it is. I think we need to go back to finding ways that everything is not so compartmentalized, thinking of more holistically if we can do it. I see a change in the students that are in higher ed at this point than from 10 years ago, because you know there's not time, there's not money, there's all these different things that K through 12 is struggling with, and it saddens me a little bit. So I hope we can find a way to get back to helping them connect the dots earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
let me share about an experience that really was meaningful to me. I visit with second graders as far as Imagine Engineering, and we have a series, a presentation, PowerPoint, and some videos. And one video in particular that have basically depicted the initial stages of the Google car. I don't know if you remember, it looked like an egg type of thing.
Yes.
It's a horrible thing. But in Googling, in their brilliance, the introduction of the Google car was through a man. They go get in the car and goes. And at the end of the video, the students realized that the man that was driving the car was blind. And it was, when I looked at those little kids' eyes when they figure out that through technology now we have enabled mobility to individuals that traditionally has been basically sequestered in place because there's no way for a person with a disability as such as blindness to be able to go out. So I am willing to bet, and that experience happened probably 15 years ago, that out of those kids, those kids understood right there with that example the strength of STEM. So, and we're talking about non-traditional students, and it is like showing by example, showing visuals, like that Google card example, that is not just the discipline of math, which I love, trust me, and I'm not throwing that under the bus, but there are others that can learn differently. And by showing that video, I believe that there were kids in that second grade class that were transformed.
That's neat at such a young age to make them not fearful of the sciences and mathematics.
Mhm.
Okay, Elena, you're up.
Well, I don't have anything as spot on as that example, but I think as anywhere that it can fit into existing structures, it's worth doing. Even just like a history and literature sort of example. I remember in high school they had us read The Jungle from Upton Sinclair in English class, and then we covered it in history class. And even just something that like bridged, like we still had separate courses, but even something that bridged those two things and brought content together made it, I think that's one of the few like books I remember specific details about from high school. And those things are so important about like embedding that sort of thing into your memory, because you can see how it connects to other things is so important.
That's a great
Thank you.
example. Mhm. Jan or Greg, do you see another question or idea in the chat that we had asked the panelists to address?
Constance Barsky from OMSC has posted that ODE developed the eye of integration to integrate disciplines and standards. And I don't know whether the teachers I observed used that. They were both science teachers that got the ball rolling. So it was, I don't care who gets the ball rolling, as long as they start to talk to one another. I know when I taught at Mason High School, we had a grant and we were able to hire an artist from the University of Cincinnati that helped us build a mural for the courtyard. And it was, he had all of them start in 2 dimensions and then jump to 3 dimensions. And it was such an eye opener to them as to how you go from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. And they just, and then to the art of, the colors and how they express the design. They got to go to his studio. And that was probably, I would have to say for me, that was the best part of the whole project.
Wow.
But it was for them to realize there was mathematics in art, kind of blew them away.
Well,
So
and a theme, I'm sorry, Jan, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say a theme that I'm hearing from really all 4 of what you, all 4 of you in the last things that you shared recently, truly the idea that seeing examples, like literally seeing this is what it looks like. We talk about the very big idea that representation matters. And I think this is a piece of that examples matter, that proof of concept. Look, this is what's possible. This is what you can do. This is what you can be involved with. It's incredibly powerful. I'm watching our time, and it's always just so, the hour can go so quickly. But I would like to share a couple of final slides. Actually, I'll share the slide, but I'm going to ask Gina and Aurea to talk a little bit about what we said here. We did want to share some final thoughts, and then we will have, for our participants, we will have a very short feedback form that we'll put in the chat in just a couple of minutes. So please be ready to click into that when we're through here and give us a little bit of feedback. So Gina, would you like to talk about either thought on this slide? Basically, for the participants' knowledge, what I asked when we were planning, I asked Gina and Aurea to think about, if you want to leave the participants with one big idea, what might it be? And so Gina, would you like to talk about something on this slide that you'd like to share?
Oh, well, I think, you know, being part of theater, and it makes me think about, I have seen so many students sort of fall into theater because, like, at it's typical, oh, the nerds of theater, they're not good at math and science, so go do theater, right? There's sort of that stereotype of, I'm not really good at it, so I'm just going to go play in color and not do this serious activity, right? So just right there, I would love to leave the world understanding that, wait a minute, theater, you're problem solvers, you're computer programmers, you're chemists, your artist, all rolled into one, and they don't even know that they're doing it sometimes. So it goes with that theme of, let's go back to how to break those. We were joking too when we were talking about we're kind of rebels here. We're trying to break the norms and break the glass ceiling and change up the stereotypes of what STEM is, for, still happening.
Indeed. Thank you. Well said. Well said.
Exactly.
Aurea.
I will pile on exactly that anytime that you have an opportunity to immerse the students into the actual applications that surrounds them, but you become basically oblivious to the impact of what STEM has on day-to-day applications. Having that conversation every day, bring that to school, non-traditional, STEM professionals that can come and sit down and talk to kids, and then take them to different environment briefly. One of the reasons why we host math counts at the regional level, at a college and a university, is because for many of the students, this is the first time that they actually set foot in a college, and for them to see themselves a part of that community is I know this is not mathematically rigorous what I'm gonna say, but it does something to the soul, okay? So, and that is critical. And with that, again, thank you, Kim and the staff, for the opportunity to come and share. My journey in STEM has been a fascinating one, and my hope that it will continue to go after my sabbatical is over. Thank you.
Hey.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you all. And also thanks to Elena for joining us as our special guest. I think, Greg, I'm going to let you do our closing as the chair of the Ohio Mathematics and Science Coalition. And while Greg is doing our closing, again, I will thank very much Aurea Rivera, Gina Trueheart, and Elena Trueheart. I have just thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to work with these three colleagues, and I'm just excited for more opportunities in the future. And Kelly, I think if you haven't already, if you would put the link to the feedback form in the chat, that would be great.
Okay.
And Greg, I'm going to turn it back.
I just
Can
got
you
it
let
in
me
there.
share my
Okay.
screen, Kim?
Yes, you may. Yes, let me stop sharing here. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Kim and panelists. What a wonderful, what a wonderful evening we've had, sharing experiences. I wanted to show this image or set of images of a kindergartner engaging in what was this it's a pumpkin project of some sort. Is this science? Is this technology? Is this measurement? Is this learning about pumpkins, learning about shape? Is this math? I'm not sure. So for young children, it's very natural. The world is not separated into silos, and we can provide experiences that bring joy and fascination and cause engagement that will last with those students. So thank you all again for participating in this evening's webinar. The participants, all of those who were involved in organizing it, and of course our presenters. And if you want to see the video, it will be on the OMSC website, Ohio MSC, Math Science Coalition. And once again, thank you to our sponsors. So thanks for a wonderful evening together. We will try to let you know about our upcoming webinars. This is the first in a series of webinars that we'll be doing this year. So we look forward to seeing you at our upcoming webinars as well.
Thanks, everybody.